All right, guys, so we're going to start with routing the extensions through the extension tube here, and you can see I have one with red tape on it for the right aileron. You can also see here I put a rubber grommet in there to keep the edge of that sharp edge of that tube from cutting your wire. But then you come back here to the stabs. You can see there's two holes and your wing tube or your stab tube. So I'm going to go ahead and put this, I'm going to make sure when you put these together that you get the two negatives together so you don't end up wondering what's wrong later on. And then I use one of these. This is a servo keeper. This keeps that from pulling apart. Remember, once you get this inside the fuselage, you're going to be able to pull that extension all the way through and pull this servo wire into the extension tube that's supplied in the fuselage. So here you can see I just like a little extra protection. I don't take the stabs off my plane on a regular basis, so I tape them. That way don't ever have to worry about anything coming apart there. And then here you're just going to put that wire into the fuselage there, and then you can go up front of the fuselage and pull that in. You want to make sure the wire doesn't tuck back into the elevator, because you don't want it getting caught up in that servo arm that's moving constantly. So here, once you get this set, and you'll do this on both sides, once you get this set, obviously you're going to use 2 bolts to bolt this in. And you'll see I'm just going to sort of poke the covering for the hole, and there's a blind nut on the back side inside the fuselage, so you're going to use a 440 bolt. And I like to use, I hate to use Loctite on these things. Now I would recommend Loctite, but I use as you can see, a rubber backed washer. And so these are like bonded washers, and they're like lock washers almost. They have a little tension on them because they're cupped. So when you flatten them out, they hold tension on the 440 bolt. And that sort of relieves me. I've never had an issue. It sort of relieves me from using Loctite, because sometimes if you use Loctite on those blind nuts that are inside the fuselage, you might strip one out trying to get it out or pull it out. Especially for someone who removes their stabs constantly to transport their plane. So we're going to do this. We're going to put 2 of these bolts in, get them nice and tight, and then you're going to do the same exact thing on the other side and make sure they're tight as well. All right, here you can see for the battery, I got the battery in front of the fuel tank. I made a raised mount, so I could get my Velcro strap under it. And my battery plugs right in here to my heavy duty switch. And then you'll see there's my battery mounted. That's up front for the CG purposes. But here you can see I have a heavy duty switch mounted, and then on the one side is the battery, and on the opposite side of the switch, only 2 wires, one in and one out, is a Pro EC. I use this so I can supply a constant 7.4 voltage to my servos. I don't like that spike, that 8.4 or 8.2 volts when you first charge your battery. But here you can see it's just wired right into my receiver. So covering the installation of the Powerbox, you can see here my ignition, and you can see on the end of my ignition wire I put a servo clip. That is so a female servo clip. And then here you can see the corrugated wire housing that I installed, and I glued that right into the firewall and cut that off flush. But that ignition wire comes up right here to the ignition. And you can see Powerbox sends you supplied ignition wires, and this is where it's plugged in right into the ignition. So you see sort of how that works, and then that plugs right into the ignition. And also I want you to look at the Powerbox, the complete installation of the Powerbox video. Here you can see the battery input. That is coming from the receiver, so that's plugged right into the receiver. It's routed through here right into the receiver. And then you have your LED light. This light I installed so when the canopy's on, that light is readily visible, and you can tell when your ignition is on. So that's pretty much the Powerbox installation. Just take a look at the Powerbox video, RC Tech 1. Not much to really say about the aileron mount. I like to mount my ailerons externally, so when the wings go on the plane, I plug them in outside the plane, as you can see right here. Pretty self-forward. That harness is from Tail Dragger. They're readily available and they work great. Alright guys, mounting the fuel tank here. You can see I got a fuel tank holder from MadFab RC. It works really nice. It straightens out your vent hose and makes it easy to vent, as you can see right here. So, and I just vented that right outside, just behind the landing gear. I just drilled a little hole and ran it all the way. You can see I used a pipe to secure it, and I just run that right down. You can see I actually misdrilled the hole, but the hole's right about there, and that comes right out the bottom of the plane. And then here you can see the main supply line. I chose to drill a hole in the firewall. That way I didn't like all the excess hose it took to get over to the fuel tank. But nice little holders, hold that nice and straight. That way the fuel gets there. And here you can see my choke. This allows me to have the choke outside on the fuselage. That works out really nice. And that's the routing for the fuel tank. All right, the first thing to do here with the cowl is the bottom tab for mounting the cowl. I like to use a blind nut there instead of using a screw like a servo screw or something. So here you can see I just have to sort of file out that hole the size of the shank on the blind nut. Once you have that done, I just screw the blind nut in and then use the screw to pull that blind nut into the wood, tip it over, and I'll put a little CA on it to hold it there so it doesn't push out. And this makes for a really good solid mounting for the bottom screw on your cowl. And you can see here, you'll see this little tab here has got that hole in it. You just got to drill that out a little bit bigger since you're using a 440 nut to do that. And you can see I'm gonna just drill that out. Don't mind the chipped paint on my cowl. I'm not real happy about that. But I got used a little bit too aggressive of a sanding disc. But so now we're just gonna mount the cowl up here and get it fitted on. I've already pre-fitted the cowl. I've already done all the alignment of the spinner and the spinner gap and all that. So really all we're doing is bolting the cowl on at this point. Let's get the fit nice. This cowl required no shimming, no anything. It just went right on. It fit perfectly. Great job from the manufacturer. And here you'll see there's 3 440 bolts. There's one at the top, 2 on each side, and then of course the one you see and we put a blind nut in for the bottom. And here you'll see I use that bonded washer. It's sort of a concave washer, got rubber on the back side, and that washer works great for locking in the cowl. Now I also use Loctite. I just use medium grade blue Loctite. I just don't like my cowls coming loose. Some people do, some people don't use it, but I use this bonded washer and a little tiny bit of Loctite. I don't cake it on there, but I do use a little. And just make sure you get your cowl tight. You don't want that coming loose and getting caught between the spinner and that first former there. So make sure you get it on tight, and you're just going to repeat this step for all three bolts. And That is the wire routing gas tank, as simple as I can get it. Everybody does this stuff differently, so that's just a little bit of insight.